today's big stories. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is set to hold bilateral talks with President Marcos right here in the Philippines, and at the center of their discussion are tensions in the West Philippine Sea. How will this impact the Philippines' already strained relationship with China? We'll ask this question to geopolitical analyst Don McLain Gill.
Flu season is upon the country as more and more Filipinos have been experiencing a flu-like illness over the past weeks. How do you know it's just the flu and not COVID?
And as we round up this year's Undas, we'll be talking about reports of possessions and what goes on in exorcisms. We'll have on the show Exorcist Priest Fr Estacio.
Welcome to the show. I'm Gretchen Hall.
I'm Denise Tan.
And I'm Riza Diaz.
It was China that is intruding into Philippine waters. That's what the Foreign Affairs Department declares after Beijing accused a Philippine Navy vessel of illegally entering waters near Bajo de Masinloc, or, as we know, Scarborough Shoal. The DFA stressed that the Philippines is not obligated to ask for permission to operate in its waters. The Philippines hits back after the Chinese Army Southern Theater Command claimed that the Philippine Navy vessel BRP Coronado Yap intruded in waters near Bajo de Masinloc on October 30.
The DFA says China's statement has no legal basis and that they only serve to raise tensions in the West Philippine Sea. The agency adds that the Philippines' conduct of maritime patrols in the area is legitimate and is a routine act of a sovereign country in its territory. With that, the Philippines says it is China that is intruding into Philippine waters. The DFA reminded the Chinese authorities that their interference and harassment of Philippine vessels are violations of international law, particularly the UNCLOS and arbitral award.
We see the Philippines now becoming even more assertive, stronger when it comes to language. At hindi pa dyan natatapos, no? Humirit pa yung DFA that it's consistently demanding that Chinese vessels in Bajo de Masinloc leave the area immediately.
Well, Bajo de Masinloc, as we know, is well within our EEZ, our exclusive economic zone. We do claim 200 nautical miles. At ang Bajo de Masinloc approximately is 124 nautical miles off our nearest coast. Pasok na pasok.
Pati US Embassy has already made a statement about this and condemning again itong mga statements ng China. So it's an ongoing thing though, 'di ba? Balikan. It's a back and forth.
Ito nga yung sabi nila, the PLA's persistent swarming and shadowing of the Philippine Navy and Coast Guard, as well as of fishing and other vessels near the Scarborough Reef, are detrimental to regional peace and stability. Okay, nabanggit natin, we keep reiterating the decision on the arbitral the arbitral ruling back in 2016. But as we see, the Philippine government has been releasing these statements with and being emphatic about our territorial waters. In a November 1 interview with 1PH, PCG spokesperson Tariela said, kumukuha raw, ito pa yung isa pang issue, ang China ng mga Pinoy para pagpakalat ng Chinese narratives tungkol sa issue ng West Philippine Sea. At posibleng malaki daw yung pera na binabayad ng China sa mga Pinoy na nagpapakalat ng Chinese propaganda. Ilang beses siya nag-tweet about this, sinasabi na parang bakit nga daw yung mga Pilipino pang nagsasabi o nagre-recognize ng Chinese presence in the West Philippine Sea at tayo pa raw yung nagpo-provoke, kumbaga, ng mga encounters na yun. At yun nga sinasabi niya na baka nga ay nababayaran ng China itong mga pro-Chinese Filipinos.
Because what the picture that they're trying to paint is that naiimpluwensyahan lang tayo. 'Di ba? Yun yung pinapalabas ng China. But aside from the DFA, pag-usapan natin to, the Armed Forces of the Philippines has also spoken up about China's recent statements. And Marisol Halili joins us to give us the details. Mase!
Forces of the Philippines clarifies that there was no harassment during the recent encounter of China and Philippine vessel in Bajo de Masinloc. But the AFP condemns China's statements that the U.S. is only dictating Philippine action.
Tayo po ay isang malayang bansa at mayroon tayong foreign policy na independente. So, malaking isang sa akin parang insulto yung sinasabi nila na dinidiktahan tayo ng ibang bansa sa ating ginagawa. Siguro nasasaktan lang sila dahil nalalaman ng maraming tao sa buong mundo kung ano ang mga kamalian na kanilang ginagawa.
The AFP also gives assurance that they will continue the maritime mission in our EEZ. But when asked if America can join the resupply mission, this is the response of AFP.
Our RORE mission is for us to undertake.
AFP spokesperson Colonel Medel Aguilar said that it is the responsibility of the Philippines to ensure that we will benefit from the resources in our own territory. Denise.
Thank you for that, Maricel Halili.
Again, that was the Philippines reiterating their independence and sovereignty. I mean, amidst also the other international relations that we've had, we've seen EDCA bases being put up more in the country, and we see the foreign policy of the country also change during the Marcos administration. At sabi nga ni Richard Hedarian nung isang gabi, no, kailangan makita yung Pilipinas na hindi lang laki ng United States. Dahil natatali na nga rin yung kamay ng US sa Middle East. At syempre, nung nag-abstain pa tayo dun sa voting, dun sa resolution, dun sa conflict ng Israel and Hamas, syempre pwedeng makita yon na sumusunod tayo dun sa interest ng United States. So now, and speaking of that, he also said that we need to build on relationships with other countries. And speaking of issues in the West Philippine Sea, it is among the topics that will be discussed in a bilateral meeting between Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and President Bongbong Marcos tomorrow. Kishida's official visit to the Philippines is set from November 3 to 4. And aside from issues in the West Philippine Sea, political and security cooperation, economic and people-to-people relations are also on the agenda. Now, for his part, the Japanese Prime Minister is looking to establish the initial framework to a new security treaty with the Philippines as Tokyo aims to expand its network of quasi-allies for joint military exercises in the Indo-Pacific. Kishida will also visit the Philippine Coast Guard headquarters on Saturday.
Now, to join us for a discussion on the Philippines' geopolitical posture in light of these developments in the West Philippine Sea, we have with us on the show Don McLain Gill, geopolitical analyst and lecturer at the De La Salle University's Department of International Studies. Good evening, sir.
Right, thank you. It's a true pleasure to be here.
Don, let's talk about first how China's recent statements are versus the Philippines' presence in Bajo de Masinloc. It's becoming like a, like a ping pong. Ulit-ulit na batuhan. China saying our presence there is illegal. Philippines naman will then bring up, di ba? Always the arbitral ruling. Pero paalala, paulit-ulit at somehow palala ng palala yung mga harassment. So what can we actually do more, or can we actually do more to protest these actions from China?
Right, thank you. That's an excellent first question. And, we have to understand that this is part of China's disinformation strategy, twisting the narrative away from the reality. China-backed narratives make it seem that it is not in our best interest based on international law. And in fact, just recently, the Global Times also reported that, Prime Minister Kishida's visit will be riling up the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea, for example. And we have to understand that this is not just merely propaganda. China is investing billions of dollars in, just a recent State Department report in disinformation campaigns, to project itself as the victim, to project itself that it is a responsible player, and that other actors such as the Philippines are illicitly provoking the status quo, which is far from what is actually happening on the ground. So you asked about what we could do in terms of addressing these concerns, right? Well, looking at it in terms of disinformation, national governments must empower professional journalism, encourage responsible and transparent reporting on critical developments that take place in strategic areas, and not just in the West Philippine Sea, but of course also projecting what is taking place in the rest of the Indo-Pacific to show that this is actually a pattern that China continues to engage in, not just with us, but with other like-minded partners as well, like Japan. And just very briefly, we also look into how a public-private partnership must also be forged to strengthen norms surrounding online accountability. So we look at it merely as just online propaganda, but we must know that this is a serious tool that China continues to utilize for its strategy in the West Philippine Sea in particular. It's gaining without the overt use of military force. And we have to address this through non-orthodox strategies. And this is one of them, of course.
The visit of Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, how significant is that when it comes to timing? And what exactly is in it for Japan to ally with the Philippines? I mean, you also talked about a pattern that this is also happening with like-minded partners like Japan. So to give us more context on what's at stake for Japan as they come here for the visit and the meeting with President Marcos.
Right, thank you. And, from a broader context, we have to put this visit in a context, exactly what you've just said, right? So from a broader perspective, Japan is one of the largest, if not the largest resident investor in the Indo-Pacific. In fact, the concept of free and open Indo-Pacific is rooted in the vision of former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, as early as 2007, the confluence of two seas. Now, being the only G7 member, that is Asian, Japan makes it a point to intertwine its foreign policy with the security of the region. And today, Tokyo continues to illustrate its commitment, to bolster its role as a trusted security and development partner, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. And being both Asian Indo-Pacific neighbors and democracies, the interests of the Philippines and Japan greatly align, in keeping the region open, inclusive, stable, and grounded in international law, right? So we have to understand that more importantly, our contemporary foreign policy under President Marcos Jr. allows us to open up new avenues of cooperation with partners like Japan in defense and development. In fact, Prime Minister Kishida will only be the sixth leader to have the honor of addressing a joint Congress session since 1960. And that shows us how much importance we attribute to our partnership with Tokyo. And more importantly, Manila and Tokyo also shared similar threat perceptions towards China, right? And this is not only in terms of territorial expansion in the traditional sense, but also disinformation. If you remember the position of China regarding Japan's release of Fukushima water was blown out of proportions because it was trying to depict Japan as an irresponsible power, despite the fact that China has often engaged in releasing water that is not in line with international law and safety standards. Japan exactly did that. But it's all about twisting the narrative for China, right? So this is where we align. And we complement each other's interests in this regard.
Sir, what do you make of China's statement? They said dinidiktahan lang daw ng US ang Pilipinas.
No, I do not think so. I think this is far from reality because, at the end of the day, they are anxious, of course. The main point here is that they do not want us in the Philippines to overtly present our case in defending and securing our sovereignty and sovereign rights. And I've said this again and again. So the Philippines is in no way engaging in bloc politics. It's not. Okay? Enhancing our partnership with the US, Japan, Australia, India, non-traditional partners, the EU, even Canada, is a means to an end and not an end in itself. So it's a means to securing our sovereignty and sovereign rights. It's in no way trying to bandwagon or to put all our eggs in one strategic basket, right? So, but obviously, the only way for us to safeguard our territorial integrity, improve our maritime security capabilities, is by partnering with like-minded partners that share the same vision, given our limited resources. And this is, of course, a pragmatic step forward that we are trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Don, well, the visit of Japan Prime Minister is to tackle the issues of the West Philippine Sea, but they also aim this quasi-alliance, for joint training. Can you tell us more about this and why is it actually significant?
Right. I think we're in fact anticipating some sort of a reciprocal access agreement with Japan. Japan has it with the UK, for example, right? Just recently, they have concluded that agreement. So an RAA will simply it simply means that we would be able to simplify procedures for operationalizing our cooperative activities with Japan in terms of bilateral security activities like port calls and joint exercises, right? And this will also complement the VFA we have with the US, the SVFA we have with Australia. But of course, we have to be careful about the terminologies, right? The U.S. is our sole treaty ally, right? So this does not make Japan a treaty ally, but of course we would be enhancing our partnership close to what we could see as a treaty ally, right? So we have to be careful about the terminologies as well. So hopefully we will also be able to institutionalize, this is what I'm actually looking into, a regularized maritime exercise with Japan. Making it institutionalized, making it regularized, which will of course serve as an important symbol of our shared commitment. Because as we know, China is always ready to exploit any form of policy inconsistency. We've seen this since the 1990s. It's a pattern, as I've mentioned. So we have to make sure that we stay consistent. Given, of course, our electoral system, every 6 years we have a new president, right? So we have to make sure that we set the groundwork, make it formidable, to the point that it would not seem we are inconsistent in our approach. And that is something that is a way to show China that we are serious about our commitment. So as much as we can institutionalize this partnership with Japan, regularize it, that would be, of course, a step in the right direction. And just very briefly, as Japan also seeks to play a larger role, in capacity building. In fact, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan designated a particular sum of money, a huge budget for improving the capacity of like-minded partners like the Philippines. We would be able to, of course, benefit from possibly the easing of restrictions for technology transfers, to boost our ongoing military modernization program. So, of course, we have to look beyond the box in terms of our partnerships and look into ways that would benefit us, all right? So this is where our negotiation would come into play.
Speaking of, you spoke about the Philippines being aligned with Japan in terms of principles, but how about what's happening over in Taiwan? Do you think that Japan's interest in forming ties with us have anything to do with that, with China's posture over Taiwan? And do you think that we can probably have them put more eggs in our basket by also promising, something in return in case something brews over on that part of the world?
Right. And, here's one thing, right? For the Philippines, I hear that we say that we're neutral. Okay. Objectively speaking, we can't be neutral in terms of Taiwan because we are a treaty ally of the U.S. And in fact, if things happen there, resulting in a conflict between the U.S. and China, that would definitely draw us automatically because of our position in the alliance, our responsibilities. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to maintain the status quo. We're not trying to provoke the situation in our own accord, right? And Japan is also in a similar position. While Japan is more open in encouraging the U.S. to drop its ambiguity regarding Taiwan, of course, Japan is also quite meticulous in the way of its engagements with Taiwan in particular, and not to aggravate the situation further. And this is where we see ourselves aligned with Tokyo in that perspective, all right? So it's not right to see Japan as merely an extension of the U.S. position. Yes, we are bound by the hub and spoke system. We work against that backdrop. But Japan and the Philippines may be able to craft a way forward independently, right? Away from the U.S. hub and spoke system umbrella, right? And this is what we're doing with Australia now as well. So in terms of Taiwan, of course, both of us, Manila and Tokyo, have that interest, not to exacerbate the situation further. Japan's position is also quite balanced in that regard. But the most important thing is both of us are at the defensive. Okay, so this is against China's narrative that we are at the offensive, provoking whatever's there to provoke. No, we are defending what is rightfully ours, and we will enhance our defense at the same time, at the same pace as China's increasing its assertiveness. It's not the other way around, right? So this is where we have to segregate the facts from false narratives.
That's why the government keeps on repeating that they're the ones intruding into our waters. We got to get that clear.
And we are only defending our rights. Okay. Denise?
Yeah. Recently, there have been major infra projects like, the Mindanao Railway, where the Philippines dropped China funding because it does look like that they're not interested anymore. The DOTR is careful not to attribute this directly to the West Philippine Sea tensions. But what do you think?
Well, there are several reasons for this. And of course, China has shown in the past that it often tries to utilize its economic clout as a form of, reprimanding a particular state when it falls out of line based on its interests. We've seen this with Vietnam, for example, whether or not this is directly linked or not, when Vietnam enhanced its and elevated its partnership to a comprehensive partnership with the U.S., China decided not to take in the produce that it usually imports from Vietnam and leaving it, of course, to suffer some economic losses. And of course, this is, of course, a wake-up call for us to realize that we have to continue diversification of our economic partnerships. And we have to, of course, give focus on the role of imports, all right? So going back to infrastructure, right? Japan continues to maintain its role as a top infrastructure investor in Southeast Asia. China's BRI has attracted significant criticisms because of its unsustainability, disregard for international macroeconomic stability. I mean, look at Sri Lanka, look at Pakistan, right? So Japan's economic engagement is rooted in its free and open Indo-Pacific policy, translates to transparent, democratically driven investments. While China's vast financial institutions outweigh Japan's, Japan's offer to countries are based on long-term loans with low interest rates. And I think this is quite beneficial. And of course, we have to open up our markets to more friendly competition between and among like-minded partners that also have vast economic capabilities, right? And most importantly, I think we have to work towards decreasing our import dependence on China. This is one of the biggest problems we have as a net importing country, right? So a possible way forward, of course, would be for joint production, perhaps, with Japan to lower the costs on key products that we usually rely on China for, given that we have a large young labor force, a large young population, while Japan is currently facing a demographic challenge. So perhaps this is a way that could lead to a win-win cooperation. It may be a long shot, but we would have to redirect our attention to decreasing our imports from China as well. I mean, that is definitely a step in addressing the China issue through a multifaceted approach.
Perhaps doing that very slowly. I mean, China also has a huge market, billions of people there. But do you agree with the speaker's, Senate President Zubiri's suggestion that Japan should take over these infrastructure projects, apart from the imports that you were saying a while ago?
Well, I mean, Japan is steadfast in its desire to present itself as a responsible developing partner, right? And Southeast Asia is definitely one of the most important areas for Japan to improve its position as a developing partner. Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy is in fact rooted in expanding infrastructure connectivity, not only in the Western Pacific, but throughout the Indian Ocean as well. So definitely it would be in Japan's interest. But of course, it's not going to be as simple as, do you want to take it? Yeah, sure, we'll take it. Right. So it depends on the negotiations that would entail, how both countries, the Philippines and Japan, will be able to iron out some nitty-gritty details on the arrangements and to result in a sort of positive sum cooperation for infrastructure, right? So this would deal with a lot of political engagements and negotiations. And of course, for us to have a unified position as the Philippines is crucial, of course, given that we have to maintain our position in ensuring that what projects we are opening up to would benefit us sustainably, right, without adverse risks. So, of course, this is definitely an interesting area where both sides could eventually leverage, right? So this is definitely a good point.
Right. Don, thank you for generously sharing with us your time and your insights. That's Don McLain Gill, geopolitical analyst and lecturer at the De La Salle University's Department of International Studies.
Thank you very much.
Up next, after 2 Filipino doctors, when will more of our kababayans in the Gaza Strip finally cross the Rafah border to Egypt? The answers when we return. Keep it here on One News.
You're watching The Big Story here on One News.
Some good news for the country. More Filipinos from Israel are due to return home to the Philippines next week. After 3 weeks of waiting at the Rafah crossing on the Egypt-Israel border, 2 Filipino doctors who were caught in the conflict have now made it out of Gaza. They were among the hundreds of foreigners permitted to cross the border when it was opened by Israel and Egypt. According to the Foreign Affairs Department, the organization Doctors Without Borders is currently taking care of them. Now, despite their ordeal, the doctors are said to be continuing their service in other places. Meanwhile, there are still about 115 Filipinos waiting for their papers to be processed at the Rafah crossing. The delay is said to be because their names are going through a verification process. Many of the Filipinos have Palestinian spouses, which is why their names may differ. However, it's worth noting that foreigners are the ones being allowed to cross the border, so there's a possibility that their Palestinian spouses could be left behind.
Hiningin natin ng, bigyan tayo ng priority kasi ang situation, lahat ng mga foreign nationals na gustong lumabas ng Gaza, makakalabas daw. Yung problema, 7,000 nagpas sila. Hindi naman kaya ng Rafah border na iisa lahat tumawid. No? So, unti-unti lang nire-release yung mga approvals.
Definitely some good news for our kababayans over there. But how about those that are still in Gaza City? Let's get updates from Camille Samonte. Camille, what do you have for us?
Embassy has now been able to communicate with the Filipinos in Gaza after a period of telecommunication blackout. There are still 8 Filipinos remaining in Gaza City. They are unable to leave due to the dangerous situation, but they also express a desire to be repatriated. Meanwhile, there is still no update from the DFA on the 2 Filipinos who went missing in Israel. There is still no confirmation whether the 2 Pinoys are still alive or dead. Israelis, however, are still verifying the identities of 200 bodies from the initial onslaught on October 7. The DFA has since requested DNA samples to hopefully exclude them from the list of the deceased. So far, 123 Filipinos have been repatriated to the Philippines from Israel. Another 45 Filipinos are scheduled to return on November 6. Riza?
Thank you, Camille Samonte.
Now, flu season is upon the country again, with more and more Filipinos experiencing coughs and colds during this cold weather. But how does one differentiate the flu from the COVID-19 virus? Mobile journalist Francis Osho tells us in his report.
Anyone experiencing colds and coughs as of late? Well, maybe the better question is, who hasn't yet? Flu-like illness has taken over the country as of late. This is said to be more common during the cold weather. The start of the northeast monsoon, or amihan, usually begins when we start to feel the cold weather. This weather system carries dry and cold air, but Pagasi says it also brings viruses with it.
Dahil nga sa malamig na amihan, ay paghandaan natin mga kababayan, especially medyo sensitibo sa biglang lamig ng panahon.
With flu season seemingly upon the country once more, over 114,000 cases of influenza-like illness have been recorded nationwide, according to the Health Department. This number is 52% higher compared to the nearly 75,000 reported during the same period last year. But why exactly does this happen so often?
Pag malampig kasi, nagsasara ang lahat ng mga blood vessels natin. At pag nagsasara ang mga blood vessels natin, hindi maganda ang sirkulasyon sa ating katawan. Pag di maganda ang sirkulasyon sa ating katawan, hindi masyado nakakalaban ang ating immune system.
The usual symptoms of these kinds of illnesses are headaches, fever, body aches, and having a cough and cold. But wait, aren't those also symptoms of COVID? So how can we determine that what we're feeling is not COVID?
Lahat ng viruses pwede mag-manifest as trangkaso. Kasama na po dyan ang COVID. Siyempre, malalo tayong mag-iingat kung tayo pa ay hindi bakunado kasi alam natin wala tayong panlaban. So, para natin ma-identify, the best talaga is to do a swab.
Experts also advise to prevent getting viral illnesses by avoiding crowded places and, if possible, not staying for more than 30 minutes to 1 hour. But if you can't avoid it, wear a face mask. Make it a habit as well to drink plenty of water, getting enough sleep, and take vitamins to strengthen your immune system. If you're not sure about your illness, it's best to stay at home until the symptoms subside. So to have a happier celebration during this holiday season, it's best to take care of one's immune system. Mobile journalist Francis Osho, We are One News.
A pleasant surprise. That's what Samaang Basketball ng Pilipinas Chairman Emeritus Manny V. Pangilinan had to say about the Gilas Pilipinas gold medal run during the 19th Asian Games. In an interview with Cheryl Cosim on One News's Long Take, Pangilinan said that he is happy with the victory. But he also admitted that it was surprising, especially since the team was formed late. Nonetheless, Pangilinan said it meant a great deal for the country to win the gold medal in men's basketball after more than 6 decades. He even joked that maybe the lesson here is not to have long training camps. The SBP Chairman Emeritus likewise gave his thoughts on the partnership he had with San Miguel Corporation President and CEO Ramon Ang during Gilas' Asian Games campaign.
Credit as he assigns to me for that, no, and for the many people who were involved in that. I was a skeptic with respect to our prospects for the Asian Games, and we started considering the composition of the team. And no, there were many people involved in that decision. On our side, Al Panlilio, Ricky Vargas, and a number of other people from SBP. On his side, it was principally Al Francis, no, Chua. Is very close to Ramon, so it became a joint effort between the two groups.
Now, up next, have you seen this video lately? It's a man who seems to be levitating after being possessed. Is this really the case? We'll be speaking with Father Daniel Estacio, a known exorcist priest in the country, when the big story returns. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Now, it's All Souls Day today. Nakadalo na ba kayo? Well, for a lot of us, especially itong undas na to, being the first one without COVID-19 health restrictions. And so far, here's how the day went in some cemeteries.
Filipinos across the country headed to cemeteries on Thursday to remember departed loved ones, many opting to visit today after the long break in the barangay elections last Monday. In Angono, Rizal, many took the time to upgrade their loved ones' resting place. It's also a time for families to bond and dine together.
Dito kami nagkikita-kita, apo, pamangkin, dito sila nagpupunta.
Maghapon kami rito eh. Minsan naabot kami ng gabi. Pagkain, tapos yung pagsapin.
With today's crowds, vendors also took the time to bump up their sales. Over at the Manila North Cemetery, residents have to abide by the cemetery's strict closing hours. In fact, there were some that chose to camp at the gate overnight after missing the visiting hours. Nevertheless, the cemetery saw foot traffic hit more than 1 million on Wednesday, All Saints' Day. The cemetery management said there were no untoward incidents recorded.
Masasabi naman po namin, napakaganda naging maayos, matiwasay ang pagraraos namin ng November 1.
In the Manila South Cemetery, not all the resting places are as lucky to have visitors. There are some that were left abandoned altogether.
Ilan bali ang naalala niyo pong nakalibing dyan? Bago tubuan ng...
Isa, 2, 3, 4, 5. Limang nicto.
Ang nandito?
Puro bata lahat.
Bata?
Mga bata, ganyan.
Ilang taon?
Ganito. Mga siguro mga 8 buwan. Mga nakalubog na, lahat. Dahil tumataas ang tubig dito pag umulan, malakas ang ulan.
The cemetery management is planning to convert the area into a crematorium and pet cemetery, since for the longest time, no one has been coming to visit the graves there.
Since abandoned, namin yung mga buto, tatabi namin. And then yung mga iba doon na lubog, iaayos namin para sa isang side, tsaka para mawala na yung doon, mapatag na doon. Usually yung kasi namin, yung mga ganyan, yung mga sa tomb na, may mga contract na sasabi 5 years or Pag medyo matagal na talaga, kinokontak naman namin Pero pag wala nang nagre-reach out, then that's the time na na namin, pinupull out na namin yung buto.
Overall, the Philippine National Police welcomes the orderly conduct of Undas this year.
Kahapon po ma'am ay naging generally peaceful naman po yung observance po natin ng UNDAS maliban po doon sa mga nakumpiska po ng mga ipinagbabawal po ng mga items. Marami-rami pa rin po yung mga kababayan natin na bumisita po sa kanilang mga namayapang kamag-anak. At the usual po yung mga nakukuha po natin doon, yung mga lighter po, mga sigarilyo, mga alak po. But other than that po ay so far generally peaceful pa rin po itong maghapon.
The PNP will remain on full alert until this weekend. Regional directors, on the other hand, are given the discretion of deciding whether to extend the alert status until Monday next week. Mobile journalist Kayla Makatan, BR1 News.
Now, aside from cemetery visits, uso din every Undas yung mga reports ng kababalaghan. Whether it's because of the spooky season or talagang may mga umaaligid na masasamang espiritu. What's for sure is many of us are left interested and curious. A recent one that has gone viral is a case in Coronadal City in South Cotabato. Baka napanood niyo rin po ito. It's a footage of a man allegedly possessed and levitating. The actual video making rounds on social media shows him being restrained by 2 other men. The story has since been featured in GMA's Kapuso Mo Jessica Soho. We've also had our fair share of stories of demonic possessions. But while it stirs curiosity and wonder, it's also important to understand the spiritual aspect of these cases.
And to help us do that, we have with us tonight on the show Exorcist Priest Father Daniel Estacio. Welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you.
Tell us all about exorcism. What does it involve exactly? Is it just taking spirits, demonic spirits outside of a person's body? Or do you have the power also to ward away ghosts per se in a setting that has like this studio, for example?
First and primarily, I would like to, when we say exorcism, this when the church asks publicly and authoritatively, in the name of Jesus Christ, that a person be liberated from demonic influences and activities like possession. Because, there are different types of demonic activities. We have possession, when the devil takes full but temporary control of the body of the person. That's why when the person is possessed, the demon can do anything. Can levitate, can do acrobatic feats, etc. with extra strength. And there are also what we call demonic obsession. The devil attacks the mind of the person, and sometimes it leads to suicide. And then the demonic oppression attacking health, relationship, finances, and enjoyment of life. And then what we call infestation. the concentration of the activity of the devil is in the place or in the location. That's why sometimes we would feel something, there's this demonic presence in this room, in this
Haunted
place,
house,
haunted houses. So we call that infestation. So who are they? No? Sometimes we are mistakenly taking them as, oh, they are souls in the purgatory or souls of the faithful departed, where in fact they are demonic.
Iba yun.
Iba, magkaiba. No, because souls do not terrorize. No? Devil terrorizes. That's why sometimes we heard reports, may mga sightings sa place na ito. Nananakot sila. They are terrorizing. And sometimes they are even causing accidents in the place because they appear on that place, white lady or anything, and then they causes accidents. These are not souls, but these are evil spirits. They mimic human souls so that they could have relationship with people.
Okay, now that's clear.
Father, kanina pinakita natin yung video, no? Nagle-levitate yung isang lalaki sa South Cotabato. Yung ganun pong nakita nyo rin naman na totoong possession po ba yung ganyan?
Yeah, there are many signs of real possession. Number one, there are psychiatric manifestations, just like psychiatric condition, but there's what we call preternatural or like something paranormal, extra strength, which the person does not have any capacity to do in a natural state, like extra strength, levitation, acrobatic feats, and aversion to the sacred. So when these elements are present, especially the person speaks in Latin as well, talking in a foreign language, that's one of the signs. So, yeah.
But Father, like in this day and age, mas napag-uusapan na kasi yung mental health. Diba?
Yeah.
We are more aware. How do you differentiate? Meron bang line? Because some could mistake it as mental illness. Perhaps on other cases.
Genetics, right?
Yeah. Well, with the help of the psychiatrists and psychologists, in order to rule out any mental condition, so we usually ask the help of psychiatrists and psychologists to know and to determine whether the person has a psychological or psychiatric condition. But there are cases that there are psychiatric condition, and beneath that, there's a spiritual condition. Because there are three scenarios. It may be purely psychological or psychiatrical, medical condition, or purely spiritual. But there are some cases, both are present. Because the devil could hide.
Right.
The
Okay,
devil
so
could hide.
for example, if I am feeling down and depressed, and I kind of sense that, it might be that an evil spirit is bothering me, is it possible to be cognizant of that, and do I go to you?
Yeah. Because, depression, number one, first and foremost, depression can be caused by medical imbalance in the brain. There are medical depressions. But there are depressions being demonically caused. Now, that is why we need the intervention of a priest who could do the minor pray over the person, because that's part of the demonic obsession. When the demons, the devil, attacks the mind of the person, there are thoughts that pops in the mind of the person, and then yung emotions, ina-atake din, to the point na, as I said, in the end, naisipan ng tao to commit a suicide.
Father, do we have figures here in our country? Mas dumami ba? Mas yung mga napopossess?
Well, during this...
Mas ba, prone ba ang kabataan? Or brief us with the
Usually,
numbers.
mga kabataan. Because nowadays, very accessible sa internet yung mga occult practices, witchcraft.
Which is what? Ano yung occult practices?
Yung mga witchcraft, New Age practices, albularyos, etc.
Kumbaga pinaglalaroan.
And they could double to that occult. And now, the spirit of the glass, as if they want to contact the spirit, where in fact, they are not contacting a soul, but an evil spirit.
Yung pagbisita po sa mga haunted places para gumawa ng, let's say, content.
Yeah.
Kasama ba yun? Tingin mo prone
Pwede siyang maging openings. Kasi if the person has a lot of spiritual openings, the devil could attach to the person, could latch into the person.
Father, paano yung Siyempre, alam naman natin pag undas, usually dyan lumalabas yung usapang nakakatakot, yung mga experience.
Yeah.
By simply talking about stories you've heard or maybe your experiences in the past, does that attract them more?
Yeah, especially the trick or treat, no? Those children wearing demonic costumes, because this season, no, they are being glorified. So once they are being glorified, you recognize their presence, the more you are giving them authority over the person, over you. Kaya sometimes lumalakas yung kanilang kapit sa tao because people are glorifying
Father,
them.
has there been a case that you weren't able to exorcise the evil spirit?
What? I wasn't able
Yung
to?
hindi po kayo matagumpay?
It will really take time, but in the end, God's power.
How do you do it?
Yeah. First and foremost, no, the pray over. But there are a lot of preparations on the part of the victim. First, we have to know the openings. Because if you do not know the openings and you just pray over the person as if you are just make bugaw-bugaw the
When
flies.
you say openings, kumbaga yung mga bubog ko.
There are spiritual openings. Number one, sinful lifestyle.
Okay.
Second, if the person has a lot of occult practices, New Age practices. Third, if in the family line, there's this occult practitioners and who was a third eye and practicing occult. And then if there are many traumatic experiences on the part of the person, kapag nagsama-sama ito, it will be a big spiritual opening on the person.
And then, pag nalaman nyo na po yung opening, what do you do
Number
next?
one, we usually ask the person to do the general confession, to confess the sins. And then we have to accompany the person to renounce those occult practices and then help the person to live a good spiritual life, to develop a healthy and intimate relationship with the Lord.
Pero Father Daniel, karamihan po kasi ng videos na nakikita namin, parang malala na yung possession. Nasa level na ng they're losing
Hindi mo
control of
makakausap,
their
yeah.
bodies. Like, you know, that video that we seen.
Yeah.
So, yung ganung scenario, how difficult is that? And nakita natin may holy water.
Yeah. It really takes time because it's an emergency case. If there's this full-blown possession, so you have to do the Roman ritual of exorcism. But exorcism is, trying to drive away demons. But if there are still spiritual openings, the demon will go back again. That is why if the person in the video, I watched the video and the person confessed that he has occult practice with the family and he thought that this is a gift, the gift of healing, but not coming from the Lord, but even the enemy could also give gifts. He needs to renounce that in order for him to experience total liberation.
Father, gaano kahirap mag-perform ng exorcism? Not just the physical aspect of it, but spiritually. Tapos kahit sinong pari po ba pwedeng mag-perform ng exorcism?
Well, the solemn rite of exorcism, it is only for the exorcist priest. A priest who has been given by the bishop the faculty to exorcise. And it needs, really needs a lot of preparation on the part of the priest and also on the part of the victim together with the family. For the total liberation of the
Hindi ba kayo
person.
natatakot na kayo yung lipatan ng evil spirit?
Well, hindi naman because of course we are protected by the grace of God.
Father, tanong ko na rin, when you expel a demonic entity out of one person, how would the priest be assured na hindi siya maybe lilipat dun sa malapit, or anybody
Or
that's involved in the
where do
exorcism?
you expel the evil spirit to?
Oo.
Yeah, when we command them,
saan
we
pupunta ba yung
command them
Father?
to go to the foot of the cross, to Jesus. And we allow Jesus to deal with him, to deal with the spirit.
Kaya may dala po kayong
You have the
crucifix.
cross, and then when we command them, go immediately to the foot of the cross. And we let Jesus
Sa mga
deal with
experience niyo
him.
po, ano yung pinakamatagal na nagawa niyo exorcism?
Well,
how many hours, how many days?
Yung one session, it takes 3 to 4 hours. Sometimes 3 to 4 hours. And then, how long? For months and even years,
May ganon, may
depending
maabot ng
upon
taon.
the gravity of the spiritual opening of the person. Because sometimes, the person the person finds it difficult to renounce or to forgive. No, because unforgiveness is also one of the openings of the person. So if there's this unforgiveness area in the heart of the person, it will be very difficult.
Father, saan niyo po ito napag-aralan, itong pagpapractice ng exorcism?
Well, when I was ordained priest, no, there are a lot of parishioners who would ask me, Father, bless our house because there are a lot of happenings, paranormal things, happenings. So I read the book of Father Jose Siquia, The Exorcist of the Archdiocese of Manila, and I was able to have the training with him. So the apprenticeship. So from time to time, he would ask me to accompany in the cases. And so I learned. And then we had our summer course in Rome. So for 2 summers. And then here in the Philippines, we have regular annual conferences on exorcism.
Just in case, like, for example, in a case of emergency and you're not around, there's no priest around, are we allowed to do anything to help drive away the evil spirits, and what would you advise?
Well, prayer is very important. No prayer. Because as baptized, no, we have that authority also. But in terms of prayer, we have to do the supplication prayer. We have to ask the Lord, no, not directly command the devil because we do not have spiritual authority over the person, but we need to ask directly God. No, God, Heavenly Father, liberate this person from any kind of demonic, like that. So prayers of supplication.
Father, kanina nabanggit nyo na, no, na usually before the exorcism may kumpisal na kasama. But there is also this movie called The Pope's Exorcist. Have you seen that, Father?
Yeah.
How accurate is the scenes that we're seeing there as compared to what...
the actual.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the story, because of course Hollywood films are very sensationalized, etc. So in terms of accuracy, mga 40%, no, 35 to 40%. No, kasi nga, of course, pag movie kailangan.
Yung Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Mga more than 50%. So kasi nga may mga element na nagdagdag yun eh.
Pag nanonood kami ng mga horror movies, are we making ourselves vulnerable?
Well, kung spiritually, meron kayong mga spiritual openings, posible na kakapit yun. But if you have strong faith in God, you have strong relationship with God, intimate relationship with God, so the best way to deal with the devil is to fall in love with God.
Final word, Father, how do we protect ourselves?
Well, number one, relationship with God. Faith, very important yan. So in exorcism, we have 5 R's, letter R. First is renunciation. You have to renounce any occult involvement because this is one of the openings. Second, you have to renewal of faith in God. And then, reception of the sacraments, especially confession and Eucharist. And then after that is recitation of prayers, rosaries and other prayers to the saints and to Saint Michael. And finally, reconciliation, forgiveness. So that we will be protected by the grace of God. That will be our protection, spiritual protection from the evil one.
Now we know what to do. Everybody in this office and studio. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Exorcist Priest Father Daniel Estacio. And before we go, here is our big picture tonight. This is no ordinary way of remembering the dead. What you're seeing is the conduct of a Panag-Apoy in Sagada Mountain Province, an annual tradition where instead of the usual lighting of candles, locals make bonfires to honor their departed loved ones. Panag-Apoy, translated to English, is to light a fire. These are also no ordinary bonfires. They're made up by lighting up old pine trees called saeng that have been blessed by a priest during an afternoon mass. The practice of Panag-Apoy starts at dusk every 1st of November.
So every year nga may reminder no na yung panag-apoy, it's not a festival. Yun yung paalala ng mga LGU. It's really meant to be a solemn and cultural practice of the people.
Ayun nga. So, sa mga turista na balak pumuntang Sagada, nakapunta na ba kayo?
Nope.
Hindi pa. Ang ganda doon. Ang ganda-ganda doon. Oo.
Habang biyahe yan.
Oo.
Pero hindi
Yan,
po
yun
tayo
yung
imbitado
Ay, oo
dito
nga.
sa kanilang pagtitipon tuwing ganitong panahon. Well, that's the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in and have a good night.